as well as members of the public that have decided to join and listen in as well. For those that, just to provide a little bit of context, and for those folks that don't know me, I'm Jeff Lees. I'm the CAO at the town of Penetanguishene. I was the lucky one between the three administrations at the three municipalities that get to help facilitate this meeting this evening. And hopefully you'll leave more informed and certainly have any questions you have answered with respect to the airport task force. A couple of housekeeping items that I'd like to just go through to begin with. I'd like to ask everyone during the presentation if they can just turn their microphones off. There will be a Q&A at the end of the presentation where everyone will have an opportunity to ask questions. I would also ask for folks from the public to turn their cameras off. We will ask members of council to keep their cameras on throughout the presentation. This is being live streamed, and certainly we want to ensure that this is front and center in terms of the live streaming. It is a live presentation, so it can and it will be viewed on the spot through the town of Penetanguishene's YouTube channel. And last but not least, I'm sure some of you are aware, we are recording this as well, so it will be posted to the three municipal websites, being Midland, Penetanguishene, and Tiny, following this meeting. Just in terms of a little bit of background, prior to COVID, the Huronia Airport Ownership Group, being the three municipalities, Midland, Penetanguishene, and Tiny, invited aviation consultants, Lumix Group, to conduct a comprehensive business review of the Huronia Airport Commission. One of the recommendations that came from that business review developed by Lumix was better communication and future visioning from a strategic perspective, which ultimately led to the Huronia Airport Task Force. The task force was comprised of the Airport Commission, which, as we know, is made up of 3 members of council, 1 from each of the 3 owner municipalities, as well as 4 community representatives, and 3 representatives from the 3 owner municipalities. The task force was asked to assemble a roadmap outlining all the recommendations and proposed timelines arising from the final review that Lumix conducted. The task force retained the services of WSP, as well as an airport consulting specialist who you'll hear from a little bit later this evening, who reviewed the report from Lumix and further provided recommendations. From there, the task force created the final report, which the 3 owner municipalities received earlier this year. And this evening, you'll receive a summary presentation of that final report. Just a reminder, this evening is not a meeting of council. There will be no business advanced with respect to municipal affairs. It is a joint presentation where we want to present the report from the task force, as well as provide an opportunity for the 3 owner municipalities to ask questions and receive the answers in a collective forum. With that, I'd like to pass it over to the chair of the Huronia Airport Task Force, Jason Regenball. And a little bit later, at the end of the presentation, you'll hear from me in facilitating the Q&A period. With that, Mr. Regenball, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. First off, I guess a quick introduction. For most of you, this will be your first introduction between each other. My name is Jason Regenball. I've been a Midland resident for a little over 20 years now. I work in planning and design for a local design build firm and engineering firm. In my free time, I'm a pilot. I work as a youth leader in the Air Cadet program, both as an instructor and mentor at the local level and as a pilot and supervisor of flying operations at the regional level. I've been on the Airport Commission now since August of 2020. I think I'm the newest member of the commission. I wanted to be able to contribute in some way locally, and I have a passion for flying, so this seemed like a natural fit. When the task force was convened, I was asked to chair it, and I jumped at the opportunity to be able to sort of play a bigger role in development and planning for the Huronia Airport. I'm wondering, can we get the slide deck up, please? Excellent. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so all the way to the beginning. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so our discussion this evening is going to be based on the final report that we provided to councils, and those were created using the Lumex report that was created back in 2019. We consulted with WSP, who helped us with future development planning for the airport, and all that went to creating the final report. Next slide, please. So at the conclusion of the Lumex review process in 2019, we were given a mandate to satisfy 6 core objectives. We need to provide a roadmap for strategic development to you, the ownership groups. We need to review and prioritize governance and ownership models and recommendations. We need to review and prioritize economic development recommendations, review and prioritize financial, operational, and capital considerations, provide support to the implementation process and select a project lead, and to prepare a priority list of short, medium, long-term goals for development. So in the first box, in creating this strategic development plan, it's been quite a labor-intensive process, and we would not be here today without the tireless work of our commission and task force members. So at this point, I really wanted to call out and thank Councillors Olszewski, LaRose, and Wishart from Midland, Penetang, and Tiny, respectively. Commissioners Don Cooper, Bob Gow, and myself. And a big thank you to Roy Ellis, who really took this ball over the end zone. Also like to thank Midland's CAO Dave Deneau, Penetang's CAO Jeff Lees, and Tiny's Director of Planning Sean Prasad. Without their wisdom and expertise, we would be much further back in the weeds. So thanks a lot. I'd also like to say a thanks to Stephen Wilcox, who's taken some time out of his very busy schedule to help us with the planning preparation and execution of this presentation tonight. You'll get a better introduction to him a little bit later on. The Huronia Airport Commission, in tandem with Municipal Staff Directorate, will continue to clarify our current position and shine a light on our way forward. But I think we've done a pretty good job in capturing things in our final report. In reviewing and prioritizing governance, well, we believe that it's been a great success story that 3 municipalities have been able to come together and co-own a gem like the lands that we have at Huronia Airport. If we continue in our current trajectory, we really do believe that the current commission setup could continue to provide quality governance in our current makeup. If we're embarking on executing a much more profound development plan to expand the lands and operations, the commission would be up to the task, but we would ask for the following augmentations: is the ownership groups to provide some access to municipal staffers on an ad hoc basis for issues such as legal, planning, or economic development, and that the current task force staffers, the 2 CAOs and the Director of Planning from Tiny, would remain engaged to provide their expertise and act as a pipeline to municipal personnel assets. In the future, as new community members are brought onto the commission, consideration should really be given to, by all 3 municipalities, sort of as a holistic approach to review member skill sets, whether it's planning, development, financial, legal, a background in aviation, so that these areas of expertise are covered so that the governance really does reflect a balance of skills necessary to run the airport. When asked to review and prioritize economic development recommendations, we've outlined things like further development of private hangar spaces, which we have several acres earmarked for that development. They do create a steady flow of revenue through development and land leases. We do have a growing list of potential commercial tenants on the lands we wish to develop. These include aviation and non-aviation based firms. The aviation-based ones would require airside access, and a lot of the other commercial interest comes from non-aviation businesses who could fill lands that are backed from the runway and taxiway assets. Further feasibility analysis and land use planning will be required to really fully develop a good airport master plan in order to do this in a really holistic and interesting way. Things like base survey, archaeological assessments, environmental impact studies, hydro-G studies, and functional servicing have all been sort of identified as studies and things that should be embarked on as we develop our plan further. And I think we'll talk a little bit later on maybe trying to accelerate a few of these pieces to start kicking off our plan in earnest. In order to review and prioritize our financial operational capital considerations, a comprehensive capital asset management plan will be required in order to identify what areas and timelines where capital investments will be required, such as upgrades to our facilities, which are currently a gem of a place. Our taxiways, infrastructure, runways, lighting, and so on and so forth. And we really do appreciate that the municipalities can come to our aid in providing that kind of documentation. In order to support the implementation process and select a project lead for what we're doing today, we ultimately believe that the airport management should play a lead role in implementing our strategic plan. They are the cold face at the airports. Our manager is the first point of contact for any inquiries, whether it be private or commercial developments, and are the voice of the ownership groups when it comes to ongoing client care. In order to prepare, we've prepared a list of short, medium, and long-term goals for development. They were circulated previously, and we've gone over them. They are a mix of operational capital considerations. They're based on current projected further future needs, and they come directly from the LUMEX reports and from what we have identified through our airport managers and working group and operations for current and future needs. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. If we can go to the next one, please. I hope I'm not moving too quickly for everybody. Okay, so these are just some of the short, medium, and long-term initiatives that were outlined, like I said, through the LUMEX report, and we have self-identified through our operations. And they're a good mix of operational capital considerations. This chart's already been viewed, was developed for the purpose of categorizing our initiatives into these term goals. For our short-term outline goals, our list is well underway. You can see now that some are completed and ongoing as we speak. Some of them we would like to do as part of our strategic planning process, like the property survey and creating our capital asset management plan. But you can see that we're well underway. And I'd like to thank everyone at the town of the 3 townships for helping us in getting our fuel system update completed. That I'm happy to report that it came online early this year and has been fueling aircraft at a ever-growing rate. We'll talk about how much better we've been doing year over year coming up soon, but it has been put to great use and fuels aircraft every day. As for our medium-term initiatives. Some of them are actually becoming short-term initiatives because of generous funding through RADI. The timeline for some of these things, like our airport signage, our runway signage and lighting, and our obstacle limitation survey and tree removal to maintain our TPS approaches, are all going to be taken care of by March of next year. We should have all of this stuff completed. There are also things outlined on here, like adding extra leasable T hangars or revenue generating spaces, which would help boost our revenue month over month. Into the long-term goals, they include items that would be identified under our capital asset management plan, a plan that would need resurfacing or upgrades or replacement over a long term, like resurfacing a runway or lengthening or creating more taxiways for better access to the runways. These are big ticket items that would either allow us to grow substantially or change the makeup of our lands and maneuvering surfaces in a pretty substantial way. At this point, I really do want to acknowledge the work of our airport managers. They have done the lion's share of the administrative work for putting our package together for you guys this evening. I really want to shout out to Adam, our previous airport manager. He's our longtime manager who's now enjoying some well-deserved retirement. And you'll get your introduction this evening to Zach, who is our new airport manager. He was brought on early this year to fill Adam's shoes when he let us know that he was retiring. He's got a long working history in aviation management and is no stranger to our strategic development process, as he was a key player with Lumex in creating that report in 2019. I think Zach, on the next slide, I'll give you a quick operational update on staffing.
Thank you, Jason, for the introduction, and thank you, Council, for allowing me to present to you tonight. Just not to talk about myself, I'll jump right into my staff here at the airport. I've got Rob Knudsen. He's a retired OPP who has been serving the residents of North Simcoe. Also, I've got Bill. He's a retired air traffic controller and at Toronto Tower, and he is currently also keeping up in the aviation industry by doing air shows across Canada as being an air boss. I then have Cindy Roundtree. She's joined the team recently, that has been serving businesses also within North Simcoe. And then I've got Megan Rooney. She's an operations specialist, a recent graduate of Georgian College. She's also has extensive work working at Hamilton International Airport, handling the AVOP program, helping run a safe and secure airport. And then just myself, I'm also a graduate of Georgian College. I've also spent 2 years up at Sault College for the aviation flight program. I worked on your strategic plan in 2019 for the Huronia Airport. I then also worked at Air Canada in the corporate safety world for a bit, handling passenger safety reports and maintenance safety reports for Air Canada. I then went to work at Lumex Group, where obviously I worked on that report, the strategic development plan, and I also had the opportunity to work in Northern Ontario and audit airports for the Lumex Group. I then went to manage the airport in Wyerton, and now I'm here helping grow this asset for the municipalities of North Simcoe. I'd like to introduce Roy as Chair of Commission, and thank you, Roy, for your tireless effort moving this down the field.
Well, thank you, Zach, and everyone on the phone. On behalf of the Airport Commission, a big thanks for the opportunity for us to tie a ribbon around this report and send it back to the respective councils for decisions concerning next steps. Before I speak to the key attributes slides, Sarah, if you could just keep the team up, that's great. No, just kidding, sorry. I wanted to take a moment and comment on the small but mighty team, and I think we already mentioned Green Team, who wake up every day with a maniacal focus on providing safe and efficient operations at the airport. Over the last few months, we've experienced significant talent changes at the airport. As mentioned, our previous manager, Adam, announced his retirement. Our one and only full-time ops specialist relocated to Southwestern Ontario, and our bookkeeper left all over the span of 2 months. The good news is, from our aviators and customers' point of view, we didn't skip a beat. This is good news considering we're an essential service operating in a COVID environment. The overarching headline is we continue to provide service excellence and, importantly, without incident. So to the team, a big thank you. And I believe Adam Rigdon is on the phone. And if it's probably appropriate that we thank Adam. It is appropriate. We thank him for his 3.5 years of dedicated service. Jay alluded to this, but I just want to go one step because I've worked with him the entire 3.5 years. He was very instrumental in the airport securing a recent $310K federal grant, I should say. We call it the RADI grant, which is facilitated by FedEv. And it's in support of our GPS approach and runway lighting upgrades. Additionally, Adam was a key player on the HAT team, which was basically the commission where we bolted on 2 CAOs and the planner from Tiny, as you heard before. So to Adam, thank you. Looking ahead, we're delighted to have Zachary lead the team along with Megan, who was mentioned, are both Georgian College grads, a partnership that continues to pay dividends on many fronts. In only a few short months, Cindy, our new bookkeeper, has our books looking better than ever as we welcome our 2021 audit. And that's obviously of concern for the municipalities, and that will commence in the next week or so. Finally, both Bill and Rob, our part-time operations talented staff, stepped up by agreeing to work anytime, any day, at night for call-outs to help us through our succession challenges. We want to publicly recognize the talent we have on the ground, driving enormous value for the owners and the community alike. So when thinking about key attributes, we're good now, Sarah. When thinking about key attributes, over and above our talented team, it's important to remind ourselves we enjoy 350 acres of land, which speaks to an enormous development opportunity given airport operations likely only require 1/3 of that amount. More on that to come later on. The terminal building is still impressive, to use Zach's words, and we boast a 4,000-foot runway, and that's comparable in length to Buttonville and Toronto Island. We're just shy of 100,000 square feet of private commercial hangar space, and our aviated guests enjoy a brand new state-of-the-art fuel system thanks to the 3 owner municipalities who collectively supported the purchase of a safer and more efficient above-ground fueling service system. Thank you. Other attributes include commercial partners who directly support the aviation business and fuel the local economic benefit. And finally, we have a unique ownership model that's been touched on in that the costs and therefore the benefits are shared among the 3 owner municipalities, a visionary ownership model conceived many, many decades ago. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention, however, that Tay Township would be a natural addition to this ownership model, which by doing so would encompass the interests of all North Simcoe residents, similar to the many strategic shared service models you already have in play. With respect to governance, to echo what Jason said, your team is quite comfortable with the current makeup of 3 appointed councillors, 1 from each owner group, and 4 community reps, should our mandate remain status quo, which is basically to run safe and efficient operations at the airport. However, as mentioned, should ownership decide to expand the mandate on the commission, allowing it to sell and develop specific lands, then one would encourage a deeper dive with respect to the governance model, with a keen eye on having a competency-based complement of appointed commissioners. Next slide, please. The headline clearly on this slide is emergency service support. I want to call out 15 medevac flights in support of GBGH, 48 police and 8 military movements into CYEE in 2021. Some of you may not know that LCAN uses our facility to support their leading edge research, as our vast open space is ideal for their visionary purposes. Among many other worthy causes and benefits listed on the slide, we had a new partner in 2021 that called upon your airport to support local gypsy moth operations. Speaking of partnerships, next slide, please. Gail Hunt, CEO of GBGH and soon to be CEO, as you know, of RBH, explains in a recent letter that during inclement weather, our GPS technology capabilities allows Orange to navigate safely transporting emergency trauma patients. Homer Tian, the CEO of Orange, echoes Gail's sentiments without reading the whole paragraph. Catherine Rowe Bailey, the general manager of LCAN, reinforces the strong partnership LCAN has with the airport. Elcan also is one of the largest employers in North Simcoe with a huge economic footprint. And finally, Matt Hines, the president of Zen Air, who employ approximately 20 skilled laborers, is appreciative of the value the airport provides, as Zen Air's innovations are often tried and proven at the airport, and their successful products then shipped all over the world. This is real economic development, meaning innovation happening locally, raw materials sourced locally, skilled labor from the local catchment, yet revenue is predominantly collected from another geography around the world. Some operating highlights, if I may, and let's call it a scorecard, and I'll go through this fairly quickly. Aircraft movements were up 54%. Next slide, please, sir. Year over year, 21-20. We achieved a $310,000 grant, non-repayable, which I mentioned. Fuel sales continue to increase, notwithstanding some of the headwinds COVID blew our way. We enjoy a 100% occupancy rate for our leased and owned hangar facilities. We were able to provide local and itinerant air traffic with improved weather information, which supports safe travel, known as LWIS. I think you'd agree these growth trends are welcome news against the backdrop of maintaining a modest municipal tax levy, with the Airport Commission staff priding itself on keeping the expense line virtually flat over the last 5 years. So next, actually, Sarah, let's leave this slide up, please, while I introduce our guest. Stephen Wilcox, I got to meet 5-6 months ago. He's the manager of the Oshawa Executive Airport. He has a wealth of aviation experience as a pilot, a manager of multiple airport operations, decades of experience developing strategic plans, chairing various ad hoc NAV Canada committees, and the list goes on. But the most important thing about our next speaker is that under the heading of value add, and that is that he's put development plans in play with tremendous success. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Steve to take us through our next few slides vis-a-vis development opportunities. Stephen?
Well, thanks very much, Roy, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. As Roy said, my day job is that I operate and manage the Oshawa Airport for the city of Oshawa. I also sit on the board of directors for the Canadian Airports Council, which is an association of airports across Canada. I'm the former president of the Airport Management Council of Ontario, which is our provincial association of airports. And I served on the NAV Canada Advisory Committee for 6 years, again, acting as the chair. All of this really to say that I've been in aviation for a long time, and I've seen a lot of different airports, from the big airports in detail like Pearson down to very small, very important community airports. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I was brought in, as they mentioned, really to do a peer review, to look at the work that had been done to date, and also to provide any additional input. And so I'm happy to be here with you tonight. The first thing I want to tell you is that the work that you've done and that the committee did and the task force did is excellent work. The studies were well done, well thought out. They brought together in their final report. And all of those are really important steps. You can't get to where you are without having done that background work. So that's a really important piece of the puzzle. And looking at the slide, and we'll go back one slide, please, Sarah, if we could. I do want to leave that one up for just a minute. A couple really key things on here. As Roy touched on it, we've seen some nice growth in terms of aircraft movements, in terms of fuel sales. And looking on the revenue and expense side, the most important piece is that the expenses have been managed and kept in check. Roy touched on the heights. The RADI funding is great. That is a national initiative out of part of the COVID response from the federal government. A very select few airports did receive that. I can tell you we did not receive it in Oshawa, and but very pleased that you did receive it, and those funds are being very wisely used. I want to underline for you the 15 medevacs, and I'll touch about that a little bit on the next slide. The weather information system, again, really, really important, and today's a great day. The helicopter is not landing at the hospital today. If there's an accident, it's landing at the airport. It's using that weather, it's using the GPS approaches. And of course, as we know, car accidents happens when the weather's bad. So very, very important tools to support your hospital there, serving the communities. So Sarah, if you could go to the next slide for me, please. Important things, economists always like these. GDP is an important item to understand for your airport. And again, in your case, just a little less than 3.5 million in GDP and 30 jobs. Those would combine both what we call direct and indirect jobs. Those are really important numbers. But I've done this presentation many, many times across the province and nationally. And I always ask everyone in the room, and I'll ask you this, is there anyone here that would not pay $20 a year, every year, to make sure that that air ambulance could come and get you or your wife or your brother or your son or your daughter? And of course, the answer is always inevitably, absolutely. Where do I sign up? Because if you're one of the 15 people that needed that flight in the last year, cost is not a factor, right? The good news here at $3.72 per community member, it's well below an average across the province and is a great, very limited cost to your community members. And again, it's really important when we look at it in the terms of the essential service like the medevacs. I want to tell you in Oshawa for many, many years, we were around $6 and quite pleased with that. If you look at communities like Muskoka, substantially more, or the region of Waterloo, again, much, much higher there. All of those as being municipally supported airports. Now, I will tell you, Oshawa is getting down close to your number. That's only because our population has doubled in the last 5 years. So that helps drive that cost per person down, but very, very low cost when we look at the benefits of the airport. And again, today is just an excellent day to understand the opportunity that the airport presents. So if we could go to the next slide again, Sarah, please. I asked the team to bring this one up again, because again, I just really want to stress this community value piece here. The 15 medevacs, the 48 police service calls, the 8 military, supporting companies like Elcan, the Gypsy Moth program. Again, just great initiatives that are required for communities to be prospering. You can look globally anywhere in the world, and every booming community has one thing in common, and that is an airport. Now, an airport doesn't guarantee success, but you will not find a growing, prospering community without airports to support these important components and to help drive economic growth, to drive and create jobs. Again, the work of the Coast Guard, of course, anytime there's a challenge on the water, and there's lots of that around you, really important to have the airport to resource. Nice picture of your new fuel facility in the background. And again, I commend you for making that investment. So when you look at the GDP, when you look at the employment, when you look at the low cost on a per resident impact, and we look at the community value, Sarah, if you could flip to the next slide for me, please. What all of this says very, very clearly is that the social and economic benefit significantly exceeds the social and economic cost. And I want to repeat that because it is the most important thing. If you only take away one thing from tonight, this should be the nugget. And again, it's that the social and economic benefit significantly exceeds the social and economic cost. That's the big picture goal for the airport. So Sarah, if you could go to the next slide, please. I want to just touch a little bit on this slide. The airport is regulated by the federal government, and everything that takes place at the airport is governed by there. So they are paramount in the form of all regulations. I won't spend too much time on the top part of this because I know you've read it all and seen it in the presentation that was sent out in advance, but that's a really, really key piece of the puzzle to understand. Now, lots of municipalities apply municipal standards. We do it in Oshawa. Everything that's built goes through the building code, but we do that because it makes sense. It's an industry best practice, but we don't have a regulatory authority to do so, but it makes sense, so we do it. And that's the distinction between federal or provincial or municipals, with the federal piece being supreme, if you will. The last bullet's the most important piece here, and that is that the commission operates within that tri-party agreement with a primary mandate of ensuring the safe and efficient operation of the airport in compliance with the Canadian aviation regulations. That's what CARS stands for. And I want to tell you that I've looked at the agreement in detail. I think it's a great agreement. I share the sentiment that there's some opportunities to have a discussion with Tay about that opportunity. I also want to commend you for bringing together the task force, for the commission having done that, to brought in 3 key individuals from the 3 municipalities to support the initiatives. And again, commend the commission for anchoring that on a go-forward basis. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to have senior people at the staff level, 1 from each in this case, working with the airport and really tying that direct link to what your goals and dreams and desires are from the community, and also being able to bring back to a council in particular those opportunities so that you can see them and understand them because you have a man on the ground. So again, I think that's just a great initiative. Commend you for having done it and encourage you to continue to do so. Let's go to the next slide, if we could, Sarah, please. You're not alone in this, and there's a number of airports. I picked a few here in Ontario, but you could look nationally at this. Oshawa, where I'm from, we're well into this story and have really began enabling the airport back in 2006. Lots of great growth there. Peterborough is another great example where they really embrace the airport at the community level and have seen tremendous strides in growth there. Lake St. John's, another great example. Now, it happens to be a private example, but the owners there made investment. Now, that owner also recently acquired Wyerton and Owen Sound. And I put that up as a word of caution. I think it, to be honest, is very short-sighted on the part of Wyerton and Owen Sound to release control of this important asset, which is what they do when they sold it. And so while I think investment is good and enabling your airport to do something, I would never recommend that you give up the ability to manage that asset to the benefit of your community. And again, when we look at that, it's about making sure that it's safe and efficient, can deliver the services the community need, and while managing the costs to the community. That's the best model. Private business is always about business, and it will not always align with your interests. So making sure that you continue to control that. I cannot stress that enough, but these are good examples of where investment can work. If I could, Sarah, we'll bring up the next slide, please. So this is the planning map out of the WSP report. I know you've all seen that, or certainly all of council have. Really a couple key pieces that I just want to touch on here. I thought it was very well done. In particular, it identifies, of course, you have 350 acres. To put that in context, for about 480 acres in Oshawa, Buttonville's only 220. So it's a really nice land holding for you. They've identified the current aviation phase as phase 1, and that's where you have the large block of private hangars there currently now. It's identified some additional lands for aviation development, but it's also identified some lands that are earmarked for non-aviation commercial development. We did that in Oshawa, so we removed some of our airport lands for non-aviation opportunity, and I'll speak to some opportunities with land sale versus lease in the next slide or two. But again, it's a great strategy, and you have all the makings, really the potential in place there. And it's just a matter of doing a few next steps so that you're able to step into some opportunities. I believe Jeff mentioned, or Jason rather, that they've, have a growing list of people that are interested in being at your airport. And that's an exciting opportunity to have. So let's go on to the next slide, if we could. Sarah, again, just to kind of recap that, you've really got the east side of the airport, call that the Eastern Commercial Development Area. You've got 9.6 acres potential. It could be non-aviation. You've got another 7.6 acres that would be aviation development. And of course, you have the whole western side of the airport as well that could be developed. So those are really key opportunities for you because it's there, it's ready, and it's just a matter of doing some initial steps so that you could step into those opportunities. And the next slide, Sarah. And I want to talk about a couple of key things that I brought to the committee, some of which they'd already been thinking about. The first one is the sale versus lease piece of the puzzle. And so in a normal business model, if you have a small pile of money and you want to start a business, you can go buy a land, you can put a building on it, you own the building and the land, and you can open your car garage repair business or whatever that might be. But you can have the capital. Airports for many years had a really odd model where we said to businesses, we want you to make investment, but we only want to lease the land. And it really is an old throwback from the 70s Transport Canada model. And it is a real detriment to business. So in Oshawa's case, we made land available for purchase rather than lease. If you want to lease it, we'll lease it, but we're happy to sell it. And that really opened up the opportunity because it allows business to make sound business decisions on the same basis they can make any other business investment. Also much easier because banks and financial institutions understand bricks and mortar, right? They don't understand goofy 20-year leases. What's also important is if you look at the 9.6 and the 7.6 acres, that's 17.2 acres that basically are there, that represents about $2.5 million in potential capital investment that can be used to advance your capital initiatives or your capital needs at the airport, keeping in mind that that's dollars off the tax levy. If we just look specifically at the 30 private hangars that you have there, and I want to say that the real estate agent of record for Tiny put your value at about $150,000 an acre, by the way. That's how I got the 2.5. I want to tell you in Oshawa, we're about $500,000 per acre. So it's a reasonable comparison there. But if you were to look at the 30 hangars that you have now and took that footprint of their hangar, added in the space out front where they've got to pull their airplane out, you have the potential to generate almost $500,000, about $450,000 in capital today. And I suggest that if you speak to them, they would be ready, willing, and eagerly interested to do so because all of us would rather own than lease. So that's something, again, it removes that burden off the tax levy. Now, the opposite side to that, of course, is to say, well, you know, if we sell versus lease, we lose the lease revenue. But I'm going to suggest that you'd only lose a portion of your lease revenue because part of the obligation you have to the tenants that lease the land is you plow the taxiway. That's how they drive the airplanes out, called taxiways, in case you missed that piece. You plow that, you maintain it in the winter, you seal the cracks in the summer, and it's still reasonable to make a contribution towards that from each one of the property owners. And so there'd be some reduction in the leases, maybe to half. But not a total reduction. So I think when you look at the capital side, you're going to figure out very quickly that that's a real viable opportunity for you and something that I would strongly encourage you to look at. Again, we did it with great success in Oshawa. The other key thing for you is that I think it also sets you up very nicely to have a competitive advantage against other airports in this portion of Ontario where we are, where you are. And because again, if a business is looking at locating, whether it's an individual looking to build a private hangar or a business looking to make investment and create employment lands, if they can buy the land over lease, you're much more attractive to them. And so that's a nice competitive advantage you'd have over a lot of your neighbors. So enough about that, and happy to answer any questions at the end about that. Eastfield Lotting Plan, I think, is a really key piece. So we looked at the WSP plan, but the next thing is really to look at it and decide, okay, this is the land, get an R plan, like have it surveyed, begin to look at your road access. You can create through access agreements, proper legally deedable properties so that as you move forward with the either non-aviation or aviation development, you can do that. You can identify where you want employment lands versus non-employment lands. So that's really important because you're going to want to set some aside for employment lands, but you're also going to want to have some opportunities for non-employment lands for private individuals to put up hangars because you will have demand for that. But it's really about advancing the lotting plan. And I think you've got a good resource group in your task force to be able to take that probably 95% of the way with some input from your planners and your various planning departments, as well as a little bit of outside work, I think. The next one is financial plan. And again, that's really key. The goal of the financial plan is really simple here, folks, and that is to operate the airport in a safe and efficient manner while keeping the costs as reasonable as possible for the residents and for the businesses that they serve. It's really that simple. And certainly one of the important components of that is to look at your capital plan. You're doing that at the municipal level, right? So right now we've got a mandate from the province to list all of your linear assets, is the term we like, roads and street lights and park benches and all of those things, as well as your rolling equipment, plows and trucks and all of those pieces of equipment. And originally the deadline to have all of that completed and to look at your capital needs in the future and your forecast capital needs was originally June of next year, 2023. That's been pushed out to June of 2024. So you're going through that exercise. And I would encourage you with your various planning departments to roll the resources into the airport to get that done. And I think there's already been some conversations around that. So very, very important piece that you understand and be able to look at the capital needs of the airport, because that needs to fit in the financial plan. I also encourage you to do that because I know when you do that, you're going to go, hey, where was that 2.6 million bucks Steve said? And it just becomes very attractive there for you. The other item I want to bring up is just talking about the tax beneficiary here from a property tax standpoint. So if you advance the strategy to grow the airport, to enable it, you will have growth. And one of the things you should be looking at, because you have this tri-party agreement right now where you're sharing costs between all three of the townships, all three of the municipalities, you may wish to consider looking at some portion of the property tax from the growth coming back into the airport budget. So of course, Tiny would benefit 100% for the growth. I'm suggesting perhaps they benefit from 50% of the growth, and that Tiny contribution is increased by the remaining growth. Just something to consider. You wouldn't be the first to do it. It's been done elsewhere. And it really reflects the fact that growth is good for everyone and we should share it appropriately. On the last piece, again, as part of that development plan, is really looking at what's our short term, what's our medium, and what's our long term here. And long term, really all we want to do is make sure that you've positioned yourself well to step into the opportunity. That's what advancing survey for the airport would do, and doing some preliminary work, understanding how services might work. As was mentioned, some site work to understand some archaeological, some of those things. So that's really where I'm going to leave it for now. And again, I am sticking around. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. And so with that, Roy, I'll hand it back over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Steve. On behalf of the folks on this call, we'd like to thank you for your valuable insights and your experience. You've been a tremendous partner as we attempt to navigate through the process and to define the size of the opportunity. And I'm sure councils on the call will have several questions, which I'll be directing at you. So to use an aviation term, hold short, pal, okay? Hold short. Next slide, please, Sarah. So basically on the next slide, we have 4 actionables that this is not for necessarily a council engagement. It's just that you need to know what we have, what we're doing, I guess, this year and what we're committing to. I'll go to number 2 first, which is implement the RADI funding initiatives. We got a 1-year extension on that. The grant date was actually 2-3 weeks ago. The government suspended the awarding of grants because they called the election last fall. And then when they did decide to put it back on the table, they gave us 3 months notice, and they told us for 1 month. Now here we are about to try and dig up 5,000 feet of runway sides for lighting with 10-foot snowbanks, and that dog didn't hunt, as you can imagine. So the good news is we got a 1-year extension, so we can put this work out to 3 companies, do it right, and that way we're not panicking and all those good things. The other thing it does is it protects our GPS, and I think the real key headline here is by the work and the effort that went into getting that grant. And Steve, thanks for the nice words about our success. But that 310,000 is from a higher level government, and that's capital that we don't have to find and we don't have to spend. So that's the really great news. The Airport Commission providing tenure to HAT. We already discussed that in conversations with the 2 CAOs, David Deneau, Jeff Lees from Penetang, and the planner, Sean. who I don't think is on this call, but he certainly joined at the hips with Robert Lamb. I know that. They supported the idea that there's still much work to do, especially in the election year, where continuity of purpose and momentum matters. So our plan is to keep that in play, obviously, because staff resources report to councils. You have to bless that, that motion that we passed at the last commission meeting. Survey property and site assessment. Sean and the other two planners, I understand, did some extensive work on what it might look like to do the whole airport, 350 acres. We don't think we need to spend 400K. We think we can get started a much smaller amount. We do have some capabilities on the at the airport, including Sean, who lends a key eye as well. And our focus real amount of acres or acreage on the east side, we call the low-hanging fruit. So we're not getting into environmental issues and other issues on the west side that some of you are very, very familiar with. And I'm thinking of George Cornell, who chaired that board, and he knows some of the challenges we would have on the west side under the heading of development. The capital plan we've already touched on, and we thank the municipalities. Our understanding is when we put that in our budget, you said, look, we can supply some resources because we have to do it ourselves. We've started the journey. We haven't finished the journey because, quite frankly, we don't have the resources and or the capability. So those are the four things that we're focused on in 2022, which is a nice segue then to the summary. Before we turn it over back to Jeff to navigate. So the first thing is, sorry, Sarah, next slide, please. All right, so first one is basically to support the continuation of the HAT working team. That includes the 3 staff resources we've spoken about several times. The second consideration, and these will be considerations that you would obviously have questions about tonight, and through Jeff and the CAOs, there would be some sort of resolution, I guess, presented to councils, a common resolution, hopefully from all 3 municipalities that you guys can chew on and then give direction about subsequent to those next council meetings. So support the continuation of the 3 planners and the HAT team, identifying some site planning work that's necessary to get started. And finally, supporting the sale of any lands on the east side in this particular case, and also land under existing private hangars, which will in effect help alleviate municipal capital contributions to CYEE, which is the airport. And then if I could, a final comment, before I turn it back to Jeff, I think it would be highly appropriate to ask the 3 sitting councilors who double as commission appointees and HAT members to comment on the material presented tonight and their individual take on the HAT team's recommendations and next steps. So I guess because Midland owns 50% of the airport, I know it's housed in tiny, but Cody Ochevsky, would it make sense for you to have a comment? If you do, this is a good time.
Yeah, of course. I'm not short on words when it comes to the airport. It's one of my favorite conversations going in Midland. So, and it's on the outside of Midland. So it's so great. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. Thanks for taking the time. I know it's getting late, so I'll keep it short. I'm probably one of the few people on this side of the table that's not extremely passionate about airports. I'm not extremely passionate about aviation, but I am extremely passionate about making sure that Midland taxpayers are getting value for the tax dollar. So emergency services aside, as much as important as that is, and as much as it's been embellished in this meeting, there's so many great things going on at the airport that I'm excited about. I've been on the commission for a few years pre-pandemic, and even through the pandemic, we've seen some serious challenges and not slowed down one bit, as you can see from the recordables. Now Midland's doing great too. There's not a lot of butter tarts flying out of Midland. I'm glad to see that coming out this year, and we're getting back on track. I did want to go crazy and invite everybody to this meeting, but I think it's important that everyone here right now is the people that should be seeing this presentation. I think we've planted some great seeds. I think the next one will be for the public and all the great things that are coming up and the tax relief and all that great stuff. It's sometimes harder to see the long-term picture. This is one of the things that excites me to run for council again and be involved for 4 more years. I really want to be involved with the airport, whether or not I get elected. It's been such a great team, and we've worked so well together. I think there's so much potential here. This is such great asset to Georgian College, and great synergies there. Great synergies for the 3 municipalities, and also great partnerships with local businesses and commercial tenants. So it's something I'm very passionate about, as much as it's not aviation or the airplanes specifically. This is something I've dug my feet into, and I'm very proud to be a part of. So thanks for taking the time.
Well, thanks, Cody. And I can see we've got Gib, our tiny rep, who was on the commission several years ago and just recently came back. So Gib doesn't necessarily have all of the knowledge of the meetings we went through, but he's a quick study, and I'm sure he can tie a ribbon around this quickly. Gib, are you there?
I'm here in living color, no less. And I won't make any announcement as to whether I'm going to run in the election, but I'm in love with the airport. I've watched it. I was on it, the Airport Commission, for 4 years, and then I was off because we reshuffled the jobs in Tiny for the council to look after. But since I've come back and sort of picked up the slack, I've seen that this machine is running really smoothly. You know, you'd think if you lost all your management team down to the last person, that you would misstep. They did not miss a step. They got all the jobs done, and I'm proud as anything of the group that are running it right at this point. We've got the safety aspect and efficient aspect of this business under control. I think from a Tiny perspective, we look at the assessment, and we may very well be willing to share this assessment, but that would have to be discussed at council. And the other thing is the thought of pushing the 7th concession through to Ed Connolly is a great idea, because it would give the businesses that are interested in purchasing lots and developing whatever it is that they want to do, 2 means of access. So I think this thing has got a fire under it, and I think it's going to do really well. And if I run in the next election, I would love to be here and be of service to this process. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Gib. And last but not least, Dan Rose, our third ownership group, and he sits there on behalf of your group, probably for what, 6 years now, Dan? I have no idea.
It would probably be even a little bit longer than that, but I think my 2 colleagues have spelled out most of the upsides. I'd really like to thank all of the 3 councils for being here. I think it's a great idea when we all get together. It gives everybody an idea of what's going on. But this is one of the things over the last 6 or 8 years that I've been on the commission, where we've really taken a big step forward. This is a big turning point for all involved. It's a great place. It's running well. Our management team, our commission team looked after everything during COVID with what was going on. I don't see any downside to this process at all. So yeah, it's a great thing, and I'm glad we're going down this road.
Well, thanks so much, Dan. So Jeff, seems like you're going to take us home from here. How's that?
Great, thanks, Roy. appreciate all of that. Just before I dive into the Q&A piece, I did want to just reiterate that the administrations at the 3 municipalities will be presenting to the respective councils individually for their review and adoption in the coming months with respect to things that you've heard this evening, and certainly one of which is on the screen now. With respect to the Q&A period, we're going to open up the floor for questions from many members of council, from many members of the 3 municipal councils, the ownership group. to ask questions. I will redirect the questions to one of three individuals, either Roy, Jason, or Stephen, depending on the question, the nature of the question. Before we start, I would ask that if you do have questions, the preference for this evening would be to click on the reactions in the bottom of your screen, and then there's a raise hand feature. It's a virtual hand. If that's not working or you don't have that feature, and I see we got one raised already. If you don't have that feature or that doesn't seem to be working, then I would just ask that you either use the chat and or just simply raise your hand, and we'll hopefully try and see you. I'm going to ask Sarah maybe to stop sharing just so that I can see everyone on my screen. Thanks, Sarah. And with that, I'm going to start with Councillor Main from Midland and then move over to Councillor Gordon from Midland following John.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for your time tonight. It's always fun getting these. We got to have more of these. This is great. We'll get right into it. I just had a question about the economic development. I've been thinking about this for a long time because that number's been calculated and floating around for a couple years now. Of that $3.3 million value that's generated by the airport for the local area, would that number be different if the airport was privately held? Just very curious about that. And then secondly, to that point of the emergency management and the search and rescue and OPP and all that stuff, how do you quantify the value that brings? Because that seems to be one of the most critical functions of the airport, is the secondary function of it acting as emergency, spongy moth, invasive species removal, that type of thing. So that's a two-part question for anyone that can answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm going to ask Stephen to attempt to answer those questions, and feel free, Stephen, to punt over to Roy if you'd like.
Yeah, no, I can certainly try to answer those for you. First off, GDP is really a factor of what any entity does, whether it's privately owned or municipally owned. So GDP can be the same, assuming that it has the same opportunities and the same goals. And that's where they differ. So in a private model with different goals, you may see different GDP. But if it stayed exactly the status quo, the numbers would be the same regardless of who the ownership piece of the puzzle is. The other one, and you mentioned something there about being the emergency services being kind of secondary, but I want to turn that around a little bit and really clearly identify that the reason the airport is there is those emergency services as a primary piece and to generate the employment. That's its primary tool there. And all of the recreational flying and everything else that goes on is wonderful, but it's secondary always to that primary role. But one of the challenges all airports face is that I cannot tell you that air ambulance flight has a net impacted dollar value to your community of $5 or $5,000. And really, it's about that life safety piece. One of the things that, again, I look at is what do other airports do and what are other thriving communities. So people are looking to come to any one of your communities to live. They're going to evaluate it based on a bunch of things, right? They're going to look at how you function, what's your tax levy, and how well you manage that. They're going to look at the services that you have, both the important services like snow removal, but the social services. And by that, I mean the hockey rinks and all of those things that bind community and builds social fabric. And that's where those really net in so nicely to a community, is that when you're looking at it and evaluating it from a social fabric piece, those intangibles, the ability of the kids to get on the ice and play hockey, or in your case, to be able to get on the water or do all the things that make your community so valuable, this is a really, really key piece of the puzzle. And absolutely, there are people who will come and live in your community because the airport is there, but it's that background of the fact that you have a hospital, you have those resources that make you accessible. And I think that's where I can't put a dollar value on it. But again, if you look at any community that is thriving, every single solitary one of them will have an airport or close proximity to an airport. That's probably the most important way to look at that. I hope that tries to answer those for you.
Great, thanks, Stephen. We'll go to Councillor Gordon, who also had his hand up.
Thank you very much. If commercial safety operations is really a primary purpose of the airport, then, why isn't it funded that way? Like really, and the recreational users should be able to wholly fund the rec side of it. Our municipality is a lower tier. We're not, we don't get funding to build the airports and maintain airports for, community safety. That's just one sort of observation that came up as that last question. Also, I'm kind of curious, the sales pitch to sell the land versus lease. It feels a little weird having this conversation with some of the commissioners on this call and who control the airport, because they in fact are leasing land from the very airport that they run and would absolutely benefit from this, having this recommendation come to council. So it feels like patently obvious to me that we've got some conflict of interest here that will need to be managed carefully if we're going to have this conversation about not leasing and selling land. Just specifically, I mean, Mr. Ellis and I have, we're no strangers to each other, and he's been a long outspoken advocate of divesting municipal services and saw to it that it happened, as a matter of fact, and as well as assets that bring savings to the tax levy, which is a noble cause, while pursuing service efficiencies at lower costs. So to me, it seems a little, disconnected here that there's a very strong discouragement of private sale, or even, sniffing around private sale of this asset, given that the influx of the revenues that would come from that sale could provide desperately needed tax relief to our municipalities. And it would also run, presumably business as usual, perhaps even better. And the municipalities would continue to reap all the benefits without having to fund the airport, because it would be run as a business. What would actually change if we sold it? I think you actually answered this in a previous question. It sounds like nothing. So if, we're not subsidizing things like the marine industry, which employs far more and attracts far more tourism and brings in tens of millions of dollars in local offshoot revenue, why would it make sense to continue funding, especially with the deep capital needs, and start selling off land to perhaps people that are on the board? Why does it make sense to continue doing that? There's some sort of high level questions there.
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. What I'll do is I'll ask Stephen to tackle those questions. Stephen, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Bill. Those are great questions. So let's talk first a little bit about why we don't get money from the province and we don't get money from the federal government. And quite honestly, it's a little void that all airport operators, whether it's the GTA or municipality like yourself and Oshawa, the same, ask exactly the same question. And in fact, there was a time in history, not that long ago, where the province used to fund both the operating and the capital needs of airports. And they quietly backed out of that in about 1996, quite honestly, when the federal government was selling off the airports that they owned, and nobody really noticed. And there were a few of us in the industry that went, wait a sec, what are you doing? And they slipped away from that requirement. So it's typical, I mean, in the case of Oshawa, all users, including the important air infrastructure users like the air ambulance, pay a landing fee. And that's some ways that you can begin to recover it. But it just is the way the industry functions. But I don't think you can compare it to the marina. You'd really have to compare it to ports. You'd have to look at a large port authority and how they operate on a fee-for-service revenue. It's really like a road, and you need to think of it in the context of a road. Now, in a for-service revenue model, in a private model, as an example, there's not much percentage in keeping the airport open at night or making sure that it is integral so that an air ambulance could land at it. And if you did, in a fee-for-service model, I would charge more, right? So if you need to get a plumber to your house on a Sunday, he charges you a lot more than Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. And so in a pure commercial type model, that's exactly what would happen. We would charge more for essential flights. And on a miserable day like today, when I know that helicopter has to absolutely land at the airport, my landing fees would be higher. So it's very, very different. And you really need to think of airports in the terms of roads. If it makes sense to sell the airport, it makes sense to sell all of your roads and let every user pay them as a toll. And we know that that model doesn't work, right? Because it's infrastructure. And that's the profound difference, is the infrastructure piece. All users also need to pay a reasonable share towards the costs, The goal of the ancillary users, like the recreational flyers, is to help keep the costs down. So as an example, if you simply removed all the recreational flyers and had the airport only for the medevac, for the gypsy moth, for those things, the cost to all of the ratepayers would be much higher. So those users all help subsidize those costs and keep them down, much the same way as the local hockey club pays some fees for the hockey rink. They don't pay the actual cost per hour. It's a piece of infrastructure, but they help pay the contribution. And so that's really what all users do. And I would look at your user fees, quite honestly, and look at them by comparison to what other airports are doing. Make sure they're in line. That should be part of your review of your financial piece of the puzzle. When it comes to the land sale piece, you ask a great question. And the framers of the original agreement, I think, had this in mind, Bill, because they did not give the commission the authority to sell land. It's specifically excluded from the tri-party agreement, so that decision rests solely with the three municipalities, the council. So, of course, under council rules, if any particular councillor had a conflict of interest, they would be required to declare that conflict and remove themselves from the vote. So I think we can be satisfied with, notwithstanding the recommendation of the commission, council always has that sober second thought, if you will, to evaluate that recommendation and to determine whether it makes sense or not. So that's well removed, and again, that model works. And I think the original framers of the agreement kept that in mind. So it's good that you identified that piece and evaluate it based on how you see that airport. You also asked probably the most important question: what would change? And the answer is that right now, today, you can plot a vision for this airport that suits your growth and strategic initiatives of the three municipalities, because it's yours, right? You contribute to the budget, you say how it's run, and you say how it fits your needs. If you move it to private investment, then you lose all of that ability. And Buttonville is a great example, right? Where it's been on the block, it's going to close, and Markham, not so important. Who cares? They got lots of airports. They're in Toronto. But for you, up where you are, if you were to lose your airport and lose that essential key piece of infrastructure, then you lose that opportunity. And let's remember that land barons are land barons. Eventually, the land is sold. That's why they hold land. And it might be an attractive, fun way to hold it. But I think all of us can recount many opportunities where a farm was kept or a business was kept. And then as soon as the key person that liked it passed away or moved away, the kids sold the land, get out of that, and see you later. And so that's the problem with that. That's what will happen to Wyerton. It's what will happen to Owen Sound. And eventually it's what will happen to Lake St. John. Because business will always do what is in business best interest, not your best interest. And of course, that's what you're elected for as your local representative, is collectively to help decide what is in the best interest. So I think you've got some protections in there, and that's why I would never give up the ability to say what is in your best interest for your community. That's what selling it would change. I think I've tried to answer those three. But if you have a follow-up, I'm happy to try. Excellent. Thanks, Bill. Great questions. Really great questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Roy, did I see that you wanted to speak? Did I see your card raise? I believe you're muted though, Roy.
I always follow the rules. So thanks for that, Jeff. And Stephen, a great answer. Bill, as always, very thorough questions. Appreciate that. I just want to go on the record, because my name was mentioned, that when we retained Stephen from the Oshawa Airport, we wanted to bring in folks that had some experience and build that on top of Lumex and build it on the WSP learnings and get some validation. And when we explored this and had Stephen come up to the airport, Stephen told us what they did in Oshawa. And it started, I want to say about a dozen years ago. And Steve, if I've got this wrong, please correct me. You'll have a chance. And he said, look, he said, the elephant in the room is capital. He said, so we actually went to council in Oshawa, and it's a lot easier because we've got 3 owner municipalities here, right? They only have 1 there. And so I commend you guys for doing this and getting together because, you know, we're going to have 22 different opinions on this, I'm sure. But he said they went and they already had the business case. They already had the offers from people at the airport who wanted to buy and control the land under their airport hangar. And so he advanced that conversation with us. Full disclosure, sure, I have a hangar. Do I care if I sell it or lease it? Or, I really don't care. I'm very indifferent, just so you know. But it doesn't matter. I don't get a vote. You get the vote. We give you the best thinking, and you do with it what you may. So, Stephen, I may have that story wrong, but I believe that's what you did. And then you agreed with your council to hold operating costs and that contribution at the rate of inflation for about 20 years while you amassed this capital of several million dollars, if I have the story correct. And that's how it found its way in this recommendation, just so we're all transparent about this. Stephen, could I ask, Jeff, can I ask Stephen just to validate what I said? Stephen?
Absolutely. Stephen?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Roy. We really looked at that, and that was, how do we deal with the capital piece of the puzzle? And because that is always the issue. The operating costs are important to understand. And again, at 372, that's a pretty great number. But it really is the capital piece of the puzzle. So the ability to land sales, we proved it in Oshawa, had a twofold effect. Number one, it attracted business because people could buy land and make investment, and that's what business understands. And the second thing is it really helped us with our capital needs. And we set it up in Oshawa's case that it had to go into the airport capital reserve. We tightly controlled it. And we actually created, back in 2007, so your timeline's pretty good, Roy, the very first long-term 30-year capital plan that the city had for any asset. It was the first, and now the province, of course, has mandated it 15 years after we did it at the airport. And the reason is, of course, that's how business functions, right? Long-term capital planning, short-term operating planning. That's what you need to do to be successful. If you don't, there's a term for it. It's called bankruptcy. What we try to do is employ some good business lessons to the airport, so that we don't have to do the opposite of the business lesson, the bankruptcy piece. Of course, if municipalities make multiple mistakes, there's a word for it, taxation, right? So we try not to make mistakes. We try to put really sound principles in there. And that just really happened. The land sales, just a really, really key piece. Explore it. I think you've got some great potential and the ability to understand it and look at it, particularly as you look long term. So I think we've probably been around the circle on that pretty good, but it makes sense. Have a good look at it and really evaluate it would be my encouragement. And you're not the first now, but you're certainly in good timing with it. I think that addresses that. Again, happy to answer any other questions. Great,
thanks, Stephen. I'm just looking around the Zoom room. I'm going to try and get to members of council we haven't heard from, so I'm not losing sight of you, Councillor Main. I'm going to go to Councillor Vadabancourt and then Mayor Cornell.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Very good presentation, very interesting information. It's certainly, we're in the information gathering, phase of things. And I appreciate Stephen's perspective on things, certainly from where he comes from. I just wanted to remind the group or mention to the group about the town of Collingwood, which recently sold their airport located in the township of Clearview. Made that decision in 2018 and the deal closed in 2019. So there is an example of a municipality that looked at its asset and for a variety of reasons decided that it would dispose of its asset and it sold it to a private company. I just put that out there just to share information. There were reasons. I don't know all those reasons, but certainly they took a different approach faced with similar circumstances. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Vadabancourt. I think that was more of a statement. I don't think you're looking for an answer, so we'll move over to Mayor Cornell.
Actually, thanks, Jeff, and good evening, everyone. I don't know if that was a setup, George, because now I can talk about the county of Simcoe and the Lake Simcoe Regional Airport that just, 2 years ago bought 90% of that airport, but that wasn't where I was going to go. Yeah, I want to certainly thank everybody for being here and for the presentation. Really excited. I've been on the Airport Commission for a few years, a while back, and really excited to see the team that we built on the operating side. I think, as was outlined, some excellent skills there, reflects the partnerships that we've been building with Georgian College, which is exciting. And I think it was mentioned as well, the partnerships that we have, obviously, with the 3 municipalities and with the numerous businesses. So I had a couple of points I wanted to make. One straightforward question. When I was involved, the whole maintenance aspect at the airport was pretty critical, and having that on site. Haven't heard that mentioned. Don't know if that would be getting into the weeds, but have really appreciated Stephen's insights onto a number of things. So Jeff, I don't know if Stephen would be the right gentleman or someone else. Just, can you give me a little feel for the maintenance side of things? Is that still a critical element at the airport these days? Yes, no, and if some sort of magnitude? Okay. So I guess maybe it was just assumed that we would have that. We do have that.
Stephen, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, Mayor, thanks for picking up on that. And I think it's a really key piece of the puzzle. And in Oshawa's case, we see a lot of medevac flights. We have jets that basically move all the organs, donors or recipients for everybody in the province of Ontario. And prior to me coming on board, they had contract snow removal, and it didn't work because they're not there and they couldn't make the commitment. Again, the contractor's goal isn't the same as you, who want to make sure that someone can get out of that airport or into that airport when they need to. And so keeping those things in-house. You touched on the Georgian College piece of the puzzle. I can't say enough about that program. They get really good people. You've got some good Georgian grads there. You've got some retired fellows that come on board to help you there, which is a great way to augment, particularly in the winter months, that snow team. So again, keeping it in-house, making sure that you give them the capital and the tools. You know, you have to have some reasonable equipment to deliver a reasonable level of service, but you've got the staff there, you've got a great complement, and just give them the tools to get the job done. And again, you're going to minimize the costs. You're going to find that there's a lot that they can do that you don't need to contract out. And with the staff having to be there, because to keep the airport safe, you need to be there. You need to, you know, when Zach goes home at night, he needs to know that the airport's in good shape, that the lights are going to come in if a flight has to come or go, and he needs to check it again in the morning. That's how you manage risk. And so you need to have them there, giving them the tools, whether it's lawnmowers and whippersnippers in the summer or blowers and plows in the winter. Just get them the tools and let them do the job and keep control of it. That'll manage your costs better than any external group can do. So thanks for asking that question, Mayor. Very well thought of.
And if I can, Jeff, just as I say, I had a couple of with indulgence here. Stephen, can we take that a little further? Aircraft maintenance was the other piece of the maintenance. So how critical is that to the operation for the users of an airport?
It's an important piece, but there's lots of airports without that. And so they manage that. And really, your role as the municipality is to provide that airport so that business can come in and do what business will do. Whether it's Zen Air is a great example, very well restricted in the aviation industry, been there for many, many years. And they're a great anchor tenant. Let them come in and do what it needs to do. As you build critical mass in forms of aircraft, you will have mechanics that wish to locate there. I know you had one for a while. That'll just naturally happen, right? And so those kind of businesses, particularly if you make it attractive for them to be there. And again, that's where that land sale piece of the puzzle can come into it. And you mentioned also, thank you for mentioning about Simcoe, the town of Barrie, buying control of that, because they understand the importance of that.
No.
Asset. Or sorry, Simcoe, take it other way around.
There you go.
Yes. County got it. I knew that. I just misspoke. Really, really important piece of the puzzle, and equally important, I think, for you. So those kind of ancillary businesses, set it up so that people can step into that opportunity, and they will.
Right. And the reason the county was interested is for many of the reasons that we're talking about here tonight. Ultimately, economic development for the region. Final comment. I see us at also, I think somebody else mentioned a pretty critical point. My experience with the airport, I think, is that we've been very reactionary. We a lot of firefighting, no pun intended, not a lot of planning. That's starting to happen over the last few years. And I think the Loomis report, this whole initiative, and it's evolved, having this task force set up, I think has continued that evolution. And that's why I need to learn more, I think, before I would be able to make a decision. I think that's what you're proposing, and that's what you're looking to bring to council, that there are some initiatives that can happen in 2022. We need to continue the task force because there are some things that need some further investigation to help inform councils in terms of what the opportunities are, what the risks are, and therefore what the ultimately the benefit may or may not be. Roy touched on it earlier. Certainly one of the things over the years we've talked about, we're missing one of the members of North Simcoe. And I think our challenge has been that we really haven't had a value offering to take to the Township of Tay. I think that's starting to come together here. And I think that as we continue to work our way through some of these opportunities and the learnings that we're getting from some of the other airports, that should help us put together, I think, a pretty compelling value case that we then would want to take forward to the Township of Tay. So again, thanks for the presentations. Good to meet some folks for the first time. And back to you, Jeff. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Cornell. Jason, did you want to touch on, and then I'm going to come to you, Councillor Main. I think Jason wanted to just respond to something that was just said recently.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Mayor Cornell, as a commission, we all had identified that aircraft maintenance was sort of an important piece that was now missing from our lands. And just to put a pin in this is that we do have a current tenant on the lands who does offer light aircraft maintenance and is looking to expand his operation. And a key part of helping him through this process is going through this planning process to find out what kind of space he requires. Can we give him that space so that he can expand his operations? He's got a plan to become I think it's the North American heavy maintenance facility for Rotax engines. And we have fielded, I know for certain, at least one GA aircraft maintenance operator looking to relocate their business to Midland. And again, as part of this development planning process is figuring out where we can put this facility and how we can best accommodate him to bring him to our lands.
Great, thanks, Jason. That certainly adds a little bit of additional context to Mayor Cornell's question. Councillor Main, I'll go to you, and then Councillor Hastings.
Thank you so much. Councillor Gordon touched on a little bit, but I'll be a little more specific. Talking about the subsidy, and Stephen, I just love your presentation. I mean, it's great to hear from an airport, manager who knows how to run things. And you touched on a couple of things and how kind of have competing subsidies. So we subsidize the airport, we subsidize transit, we subsidize our arena, and we can barely even increase the arena rates 5% inflationary without causing undue harm to some of our local groups, as Mr. Vaudemancourt might attest to. So I love the long-term plan and long-term vision and the justification for a municipally owned airport. Could you touch on the subsidy and say, is that something that is realistic to work towards minimizing the subsidy, or is that just going to create too much static and people are going to race to the bottom and they're going to move to the cheapest airport in Ontario somewhere? Or is it through fees? Is it a small surtax to the tax rate, that type of thing? Because I think that would be a really great success story. We have a great airport. Imagine if we could get it so it's cost revenue neutral, if you will, and so that then further investment into the capital could take place. Could you touch on that? Thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to, Councillor. I think the key piece of that is really to, again, understand that infrastructure role. Certainly what you want to be looking at is how do your fees compare with your peers in the industry from a perspective of who's paying what. One of the great things that you do is that you own the fuel facility. Now, I'll tell you, when I came to Oshawa, the city did not own the fuel facility. And we took over the fuel facility and brought it into our own because it's a great revenue generator. And as we know, revenue reduces operating costs, right? Or has an impact towards subsidizing operating costs. So you're already doing that, and you made an investment to stabilize that revenue source. So that was great that you did that. I think keeping in mind as well, as you grow the airport and you bring more people in, whether they're businesses that are employment land or other recreational units, all of that activity does generate revenue. And if you had another 30 airplanes at the airport and another 30 hangars, you'd have to plow a little bit more snow, which, by the way, you charge them for. So that's probably revenue positive, but you'd have all of that extra activity and the revenue that it generates. So the way to drive down that cost is to continue to drive up opportunities for the airport to be used, and to make sure that all airports pay their share proportional to what they pay elsewhere. In other words, you're exactly right. If you put in a fee structure that is not comparable to your industry peers, then you lose the ability to attract, right? But the minute you bring in, you have a model potentially where you sell the land, bring in a business that can expand either the current one or a new one to do aircraft service, and get the aircraft servicing that are flying in, they all buy fuel. And I'm always asked the people, does everybody pay a landing fee? And yes, it's in the form of the fuel. Even if you didn't own the fuel, and I don't know how much you're making, but I'd hazard to guess it's in the 20 to 30 cents per liter by comparison to a service station down the street that makes about 2 cents per liter. And so it's a good revenue source. And that was built in as a primary landing. So that's a base landing fee that's paid as a consumer when they go in there. And then some airports do have landing fees for larger aircraft. We do, and not necessarily for smaller aircraft. So just looking at that fee model, and then also looking at what other uses do you have? Are there ways to generate other revenue on the airport? Some airports have looked at solar farms as a contribution, revenue in from that, where you have land that can do it. So it's really about looking at it, but most importantly, making sure you can equip the airport to step into that opportunity. So you're almost at the door of being able to step into the opportunity, but not quite there. And that's how you're going to reduce those costs. Now, I want to also tell you that basically the only airports in Canada that cover 100% of their operating costs have scheduled passenger service, and only about 5% of them actually do. So the vast majority of all of even the airports, certified airports, is about 350 in Canada. There's about 1,000 public airports and airdromes. So you're one of 1,000. The vast majority are subsidized at the local level, recognizing that important infrastructure role. And so driving down to being cost neutral is absolutely what you should be working towards. It's in the business plan that I wrote for Oshawa, but it is a goal that is measured against that benefit. And it's an important goal because it allows you to manage and really be stewardly is the word, right? With the cost, but recognizing that it is an infrastructure. Now, I can tell you, I've been asked in the past to write some business plans for municipality where I said, look, we'd like you to come in and tell us what to do, but the only goal is you must have a business plan that says we break even. I've never taken any of those jobs because I'm not a consultant that's going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what I think is appropriate. And I wouldn't lie to you tonight or any other time to tell you, no problem. It's a pot of gold. Just throw some money in, everybody's going to get rich. Quite honestly, that's the big lie that the federal government told in '97 when they sold Oshawa the airport for $1. Oshawa probably should have said, really? It's only $1? And so I think that that's just, it's a very much important goal, but there'll always be a little bit of a subsidy there. Always is a long time. Just keep driving it down and keeping it minimum. And absolutely, I'm intimately involved in the budget that we have in Oshawa. And even with its growth, it's still a challenge, right? And that's the challenge every municipality has to deal with, is how do you manage competing needs? And that's why really making sure that your community understands that important role. I mentioned earlier about the $20 per person, and I was at a presentation in a town that will remain nameless, very similar to your communities, with an airport almost identical to yours. And we talked about infrastructure, and there was a whole bunch of people that wanted to sell it, get rid of it. We don't want it. It's making noise. And we talked about infrastructure, and that community had a cost around the same as yours. And as I got to the end of my presentation and talked about infrastructure and the cost, there was a man at the back of the room that stood up and he said, "I'm an idiot." And I said, "Pardon, sir, I don't understand." He said, "No, I'm a moron." He said, "I came here to close the airport and I was on an air ambulance 2 years ago, saved my life. I'm an idiot." The meeting was over, everyone in the room got it, and that airport is still there today, and that was 15 years ago. It's important, but there is a cost. There's nothing you do as a municipality that won't cost you. Manage it, continue to manage it and all of your resources to the best of your ability.
So long story short, the 372 is a great deal for our area. Is that kind of what I heard? Thank you.
372 is a wonderful number. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's interesting. Thank you so much.
All righty.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. And thanks, Councillor Main, for that question. We'll move over. Councillor Hastings, I saw your hand up, and then Councillor Gordon.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. And thank you, everyone. I feel a lot of hard work's gone into this, and I feel like we've come a long way in the last few years for sure. My question's around the development piece. I know Sean Prasad referenced it in an email that was contained in the report, but are we to expect a business case for that development piece? One, because of the cost involved, and I do appreciate, Roy, you said it wouldn't be as much as outlined in the report. But one, the price, and also two, I think we need to have a better understanding of what types of businesses might be there, because it will affect the studies and the designs that are done. So I'm not sure who can answer that.
Stephen, are you okay? I'll hand it over to Roy, and then Roy punt it over as needed.
Muted,
Roy,
Roy.
you're on mute, Roy.
I got to retire. Sorry, I got to retire soon. Just don't get it. Thanks, Councillor Hastings. There's 3 or 4 things I think wrapped up in that one. I think, yes, Sean did some preliminary high work with the other 2 planners, sort of like Midland Bay Landing. We've got this new asset. What's it going to look like when we grow up? We've got to do all these studies. What's the permitted uses? What types of things would we want on this land? For example, we have a plumbing mechanical company from the GTA that their lease expires in 3 years and they want to move north. Okay, costs obviously is probably the biggest driver. We have a mining company that owns 3 airplanes that might want to set up hangars there. We have modular building company who are also in the, let me call it the trailer business that you see on job sites. A drone company. We have a lot of interest, but the problem we have is because we don't have any authority to sell land, and because most of these people want to control their occupancy costs, right? They're going to put up a $3 million building and they've got a lease that there's no guarantees. They all talk about buying their land. So we have all of these leads, and to be quite frank, we're mainly volunteers, as you know, and we took this on to try and get the process started. But we still have a lot of work to do, and that's one of the reasons we decided to keep the HAT team in play, especially during the election years, so we don't lose the momentum. We've got 2 CAOs and Sean, who's been a great resource, who I say has joined at the hips with Robert. We're actually going to delve down a little tighter on this, but we actually need some direction before we go too far, because we could be spinning our wheels. If you have no desire to sell land, then say tout fini, it's open. So we will continue to operate the airport based on the mandate you've given us. We're starting a new hangar, I think it's Friday, not that I'm going to ask Zach to chime in on this. And it's interesting, in the email to us a few days ago, it said, I just want you to know that I'm not happy with the cost of living clause. We just applied a 4.8% increase for all the tenants, by the way. It's maxed at 5%, and last year it was 4.8%. And he said, I'm not too sure about that clause because I'm already paying 10, like in another airport, I won't name it, they're 10% cheaper already. So we go to market, we compare, we're members of associations, we look at what the sweet spot is for lease costs, and that's where we are. And just if I could jump on, and I'm going to come back, Cindy, and just finish your comment in that thought. But I think the fuel, we consciously say we want to make 25 to 28 cents. The margin, we drive the margin in fuel, right? And unlike local gas stations, it really is a great revenue driver for us. So you've got your land leases, and you've got your sales of fuel, you've got your commercial tenants, and you have your municipal contributions of about $1.50 a year, right? Split between the three of you. So back to next steps, we need to give you a business plan. We need to give you a ROI on some of these things. We need to validate the $155,000 per acre that your realtor of record said at first blush, very high level. This is what I believe. And then based on the comments from Steve, they're 3 times that rate for an acre. So I don't think they're far off, but the market will tell you that. It will tell you real quick when we start asking people. If we tell people you can buy land at the airport and these are the permitted uses, I think you're going to have a very quick discussion, and you need to be nimble at that point. We need to be agile. So we got to build the box now, the freedom within a framework of what we can do and what we can commit on your behalf. So all that to say, yes, we will have Sean engage with the planners and also the CAOs and the HAT team, and we'll give you more meat on the bone, so to speak.
Great, thanks, Roy. Councillor Gordon, I believe you had your hand up for another question.
Yeah, thanks. A couple of them. So is the lack of high-speed internet still an Achilles heel for commercial growth at the airport? I mean, I'll do these one at a time, just rather than bulk them all together.
So I'm going to ask Roy. Roy, would you like to tackle that question?
Yeah, we actually just hooked up, Councillor Gordon, a new service about 45 days ago. I remember Zach sending me an email that night saying it's 10 times faster. He's doing the speed and everything else. And then a few days later, I guess the clouds move in. I don't know how all the stuff works, or they add more users, and all of a sudden it's not as wonderful. We were going to actually lease. We were going to lease to the hangar owners the high speed. We were going to get revenue from it. And I said, not so fast, McGurk, slow down. Keep the other system while we test this system, and we'll see where it goes. The short answer is, it's not an advantage to the airport right now. In fact, it's a disadvantage. And if you can help, I'll meet you out there.
Okay. The next one is probably right back to you, Roy. Growing the tenancy at the airport seems obviously like a primary objective. And to quote you from your many deputations I've heard over the years, and just to show you I was listening, perhaps you can remind us about the most expensive hotel room. And I got another one after that.
Well, most expensive hotel room is an empty hotel room. And we had 3 hangar leases, sign guys lined up, I think it was 2 years ago. And then that horrible pandemic hit, and everyone went on hold. We have several other people that expressed an interest to build and develop. And it slowed down, but encouraging enough, just last week, we got several other calls now that the world has opened up again, and we need to be ready to go. So the guy was out with a shovel, I think, last Friday, Zach, and he's meeting Zach this Friday to build the hangar. And just so that you know the discipline around it, what we do with the hangars and the leases and the private hangars, the access to taxiway B, we charge up front a private lessee, a hangar builder, for access to get to the infrastructure, taxiway B, and then on to Bravo and Bravo and then 3416. So we do that. So if it's $12,000 to lay the asphalt, and there's 8 hangars in a strip, they pay $1,500 up front. So they've already paid for the access to Bravo, right? So I just want you to know that we've thought about this, and we've got now space for 11 private hangars where we don't have to upfront the cost before we get paid back. And it's just a carrying cost of money. It's 2 fifths of nothing, right? So the only expensive hotel room is an empty one, and we've got 100% occupancy. And just 2 years ago, we actually took excess cash that we had sitting there, I think it was 30,000, and we built another hangar, which is fully leased right now.
Thank you. My last one is to Tay, the elephant in the room, if you will. They're not here, so I don't want to throw them under the bus, but I see them really as the canary in the coal mine. And, if we can't seem to entice Tay with a revised value proposition that sounds like coming our way, they really get to continue enjoying all the same kind of benefits that the other three owners get, only they don't have a penny invested, no skin in the game. That's concerning. So I really think, from my perspective, Tay is the place we need to look to. If we can't sell them on the value proposition, then, really we're enjoying our own little echo chamber of, how great this is for ourselves, and we can't sell it to anybody else. So that is something I'm looking forward to seeing, is that sort of revised value proposition from that, either in this term or probably more likely into the next term. If I'm around, I'd still like to follow it if I'm not, but congrats for that. And I do see value in this. I don't need to take my questions as being ever critical of the airport. It's just the beating we take, especially this year with that 6% plus tax increase we were faced with. And then the heartbreaking, fact that we have to pay more and more to run our sports and rec center, which again, Midland mostly funds on its own. And we're going to have to try and find ways to divest those costs and expenses to the users, all while justifying while we're continuing to build and grow and fund capital projects at the airport. So I appreciate the fact that there's opportunity here with land divestment or other options that reduce that burden on the Midland ratepayer, that's my primary concern.
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. I saw Stephen, you had your hand up, and then Roy, I think very briefly, you had your card up as well. So Stephen and then Roy.
Yeah, and Bill, again, thanks. Really good comments. I want to just go back to the other councillor's question, though, about the development piece of the puzzle here and how you move that forward. And quite honestly, it does not need to be complicated. The first step is to get a survey done and understand what you have and what you have available. The second piece is to then plug into that survey the availability. And that's how we did it in Oshawa. Way before we spent any money, we simply said, here's the block that's going to be recreational development. Here's the block that's going to be aviation employment development. And here's the block that's going to be non-aviation development. And we laid that out first. We then looked at the cost to service those pieces of the puzzle. And we attributed that servicing cost on a per lot basis. So we recognized, okay, if we're going to service that, and we waited until we had enough synergy to advance that. In other words, when we had some anchor tenants that I'm here, build the taxiway, I'll give you my money, and away you go. So we waited until we had that critical mass before we advanced it. But if you try to attract a business today and everything else is still conjecture, they're not going to come. And that's what I keep saying about stepping into the opportunity. But if you have a lot plan and you have a commitment to be able to sell land and you have a commitment to be able to make capital investment to support the sale, then when the business opportunities come, you're able to step into that and decide what your triggers are. You could read the Waterloo master plan. It's a multi-billion dollar, multi-million dollar plan for expansion and growth of that airport as entities like Flair come on board, and they have certain triggers for passenger numbers. And that's exactly what you can do, particularly with your east side. It's all there. It's just really a matter of getting a few key pieces. So I think the survey and the lotting plan are really good first steps that you could do with very limited costs that can position you then to make that. But Roy set the emphasis is you really have to decide if that's an opportunity or whether you just want to continue to manage it exactly as it is, or whether you want to equip it for some growth to reduce your costs. Really the choice before a council, and perhaps it's the next council as we're moving into some interesting times. But certainly that's it. It does not need to be quite as complicated as laying out the strategy for all 350 acres. But let's start with what is there, particularly with what's there for your existing tenants or the new ones as they come on. So I just want to, again, indicate that you can do this very reasonably without big exposure to the ratepayers, which is exactly the model we did in Oshawa for the reasons that, you know, as council, there's a limit to how much exposure you should give to your ratepayers, right? All right, I just wanted to add that piece in there.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Just looking at the time, Roy, you want to respond, and then we might have time for one more question, and then we'll start to wrap up.
Yeah, just very brief, with or without decisions that'll be made by council in the months ahead, and then new council that follow. And I commend your council reps too on the commission. We're very mindful of the inflation. We're very mindful of the year-end increases. I think our budget put in the operating was 2% this year, if I'm not mistaken. We passed on costs at 4.8 to the lessees, the tenants, even the commercial tenants. We're currently now going through the commercial leases to make sure we have fair value. But we've had a lot of change in the last 2 months, as we mentioned. So we're just getting our arms wrapped around this. A couple of days ago, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, we couldn't even remit CRA payments. So we're in a good spot right now. So we'll make sure that we maximize every dollar at the airport that we can suck out of there. So probably shouldn't have said that, but I said it.
Great, thanks, Roy. Are there any other questions from anyone we haven't heard from? I do see your hand up, Councillor Main. I just want to be fair to any other members of council that we haven't maybe heard from that I'm not seeing on the screen. I don't think there are any. So Councillor Main, over to you. Oh, and then Deputy Mayor Dubois.
Well, I ask questions on behalf of everyone. I ask questions everyone's thinking. For tourism and special events, I know I talked to Councilor Olszewski, has some great ideas about large scale events there. I heard from my wife's grandfather, he once flew from the airport down to the Toronto Island to go see a Jays game, in the early days of the Blue Jays. And I remember going up in a small little airplane, flying around and doing a sightseeing tour. Is there more things like that we could be doing, not only for awareness and engagement, but also fundraisings? I know that the airport does a couple of special events, not trying to undermine the great stuff that you guys do, but is that a potential? And is that the role of the airport commission, or is that perhaps an external group, say, municipal tourism group that is working collaboratively with that to develop special events or other little packages or other airport type of products that would be a little bit of a fundraiser, but also just awareness and engagement type of thing? Did anyone on the commission want to tackle that one? Thank you.
Councillor Olszewski, I believe I see your request to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is something that in my 3 and a bit years on the commission, I've seen a great evolution here, where I felt like I was kind of a dog with a bone trying to push events in my first year, and everybody was just kind of saying, this is an airport, settle down. We want to fly in and out and all that stuff. But I've certainly seen an evolution, and with the new staff team on, certainly young and invigorated. And Zach and I have had some great conversations about some low-hanging fruit, pounding in some horseshoe pits, or some having a beanbag tournament or something, some low-hanging fruit, just to get some residents out to the airport. Because my first time being at the airport as a Midland resident was my first commission meeting. So there's probably 16,500 Midlanders that have never been. So anything to get the people to the airport and to see the value of the airport for all residents, and get off that reputation that it's just an old airport, an old hangout club. So it's something I'm very passionate about, and I appreciate I'm not sure if you lobbed that one to me on purpose, but you knew I'd grab it. So it's something I'm very excited about for the next few years. I think we need to do a good job doing some internal events and some fundraising, some rebranding, but also offer a venue for other people to come and have events as well. So thank you very much for the question.
Great, thanks, Councillor Olszewski. I believe Deputy Mayor Dubois had a question, and then following her question, we'll move into wrap-up mode, since I don't think I see anyone else with their hand up. Deputy Mayor Dubois?
Yes, thanks, Jeff. No, I don't have a question. I just wanted to compliment the presenters this evening. I think there was a great deal of information that came forward and a much clearer picture from the last presentation that we received. So I just wanted to make that comment to thank for the clarity this evening. I know that there's a lot of work yet to be done, but it certainly presents, I would say, a better picture for me personally than I had the last time. So I just felt it was important to give everybody that heads up. So thank you.
Well said.
Great. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Dubois. At this point, we're going to wrap up into just some closing remarks. I will say that if there's any member of council that has questions, and I think we've entertained them all, but if you do have any, what I would ask is that you send them through to Kelly Cole on my end at the Town of Penetanguishene. You can email any questions you have to Cole, C-O-L-E, at penetanguishene.ca. That also goes for members of the public. We did have a hangar owner, I believe, on the line that had a question, but I've asked him to redirect his question in that manner as well. We will certainly see that either members of council on the line or not on the line, or members of the public that may have questions, we'll see that they get answers, and we'll certainly try and incorporate kind of a summary of the Q&A tonight in the follow-up report to our respective councils. On behalf of the ownership municipalities, I'd like to thank members of the task force for their thorough presentation tonight. It's obvious the passion in the room and the dedication to ensuring the airport be as efficient, effective, and cost economical as possible. Certainly, as I mentioned before, the task force report and recommendations will be presented to the three ownership councils for the review and adoption in the coming months. At this point, I would just like to ask my counterparts, my colleagues, and I'll start with David Deneau, the CAO for the Town of Midland, if he'd like to make a few brief remarks. David?
Thank you, Jeff, and I will be brief. And I think Deputy Mayor Dubois' remarks, I think were very encouraging, certainly from my perspective. I think certainly what I think all of us on the town administration side want to ensure that council is always given really credible information with professional insight. And I think that's certainly what you've seen tonight. And Jeff and myself and Sean, I know on the town's side, have had the opportunity to deal with the task force throughout the year and gain that insight on this information. So I'm very glad that it was reflected in the manner that it was today, and you did appreciate the quality of it. So having confidence in the information was certainly paramount. There is lots of work we still need to do, and we're all committed to continuing to do that work and bring that information forward to councils. But I do want to thank certainly the task force and the commission for the outstanding work that they've done throughout the year. They've operated the airport, as we said, very efficiently. That subsidized rate that we talk about continues to go down because we saw 5,000 more people coming to North Simcoe over the last census period, and we'll see even more people coming over the next census period. So that cost per rate still goes down. So that's certainly an efficient operator, but again, a very professional, dedicated group. And these are, for the most part, volunteers who do this, out of the passion for what they have for certainly what that facility delivers, but also passion for our community. So thank you very much.
Well said, David, and thanks for those remarks. Robert Lamb, the CAO for the Township of Tiny. Robert, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, thank you, Jeff. Unlike David, I promise to actually really be brief. I wanted to start by thanking yourself and your team at the Town of Penetanguishene for hosting and coordinating tonight's joint meeting of the task force and our municipalities. So again, much appreciated from our end, the efforts that your team has put into putting tonight together. Obviously, we've seen by tonight, a lot of work has been done by both the commission and the task force to get us to this point, and still a lot of work ahead. And so it'll be some interesting times ahead for all of our respective councils to make decisions with. I would like to directly thank my Director of Planning and Development, Sean Prasad, who has managed to be surgically removed from my hip for this week to have some much needed vacation. And he will be back with us as we have further discussions starting next week. And I would like to also thank Councillor Wishart for stepping in last year and rejoining the commission on behalf of the township. And again, that expertise that he brings on behalf of the township. And finally, I'd like to actually thank all of the members. I believe every member of Tiny Townships Council made it tonight to the presentation, which is awesome to have everybody hear this all at the same time. And again, thank you for putting this on for us, Jeff, and thank you to the commission and our special guests for a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Robert, for those kind remarks. So at this point, I just would like to thank everyone. I'd like to reiterate a few things that was already said. Special thanks to the task force, the commission, as well as all members of council that have taken time out of their evening. I would deem this a success given it's right at 9 o'clock. And if I speed things up really quick, we're going to wrap up before it turns 9:01. So without any further ado, a special thanks to Stephen Wilcox for his hard work, fantastic presentation, and certainly lots more information to be presented to the members of council. I hope everyone found it informative and educational, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their evening. Thanks everyone for participating. Have a great night.